Hello, everybody. I am joined this Saturday morning. This will be going out by the absolute wonderful Oscar Marriott, my colleague here on One Leeds, of which we've stepped the debrief, or we put the debrief to the side just for a little bit, just to recuperate and rejig things. And yes, I'm absolutely delighted to have him back for this one. If there's anyone who I enjoy talking with probably the most about transfers is Oscar. Gabe's up there as well, but Gabe talks about, us getting Jack Grealish and that being attainable and all that sort of stuff. And
Christian Pulisic.
yeah, Pulisic, yeah. Whereas Oscar's got that level head on, and he's very good when it comes to recruitment and all this sort of stuff. So, mate, how's it going? What's going on?
All good, mate. All good. Excited with these links. I mean, we're seeing a different link each day, and they're ambitious ones, which is what I like, and the realistic ambition as well. It's not, we're chasing crazy transfers, as you say. The signings that you look at and think, yeah, that could happen. Theoretically, that could happen, and it's the right profile. I actually genuinely, I think, have been impressed with every link so far. Every solid link. I mean, obviously, Calvin Phillips gets mentioned, but I don't think that's ever a solid link. That one, really. I think that's just 2 + 2 equaling 5. To be fair, on that one, really. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with what the links are so far. But it's all about getting them over the line, mate.
Yeah, obviously the big ones. I mean, we were chatting a little bit yesterday, and Jaka Bijol almost feels like it's signed, sealed, and delivered. I think the rumored chat is in around 15 plus million. Does that one get you going a little bit? He looks like a really physically decent player. I think his headers per 90 is up there. I think it's above Joe Rodon's by I think it's on average as such as like one more header per game, or one or two more successful headers per game than Joe Rodon, which is pretty impressive with how many Joe gets his head on per 90. He looks like a really physical player. Looks like someone who can obviously maybe playing a back three as well. Oscar, maybe not the speediest on the half turn recovery wise, but maybe that's why you need someone like a Joe or a Pascal in particular just next to him to be able to provide that a little bit.
Yeah, I really like the look of Bijol. I think for 15 million as well, it's great value. He's at a good age as well, 25. Not, I think prime for defenders tends to be a bit later in the career, sort of 28, 29. So I think it's a really good age you're buying him at. Good profile for what we need. The fact he's good on both feet. I think he is right footed, but he has no angle bias at all. He's good on his right, he's good on his left. So he can play either right sided or left sided, no problem at all. And he just gives us qualities in terms of building up play. I think there's no question of that at all. I think he gives you a lot of the best qualities of Rodon and the best qualities of Pascal, really, in terms of the way he plays. And of course, the one clear weakness, and I think the one weakness really is the pace. There's no question about that. But what I'd like to think is next season we will be defending quite compact, quite deep. I think a lot of the time we won't have much choice in that. When you're playing Man City away from home, you are going to have to drop in. You're not going to be able to push up the pitch. You'll have no choice in the matter. And I think a lot of teams will face next season. Even your Brightons and your Crystal Palaces, have a lot of technical quality. They will force you back. So if you're looking at the ideal profile for a team looking to stay in the Premier League for a centre back, Bijol for me is it in terms of ideal. What he offers on the ball, what he offers in terms of penalty area defending, one-on-one defending. I think he's absolutely superb. And aerially, he's dominant. There's no question of that at all. And I think Rodon and Bijol especially, I think complements itself really, really well. I think Rodon is probably more aggressive in terms of, in terms of pushing out in that kind of sense. But I think Bijol covers that sort of and tempers that kind of Rodon aggression alongside him. So I think the comparison I've made a few times actually when the link was first made was Bartley and Janssen, but like a Premier League version of it, an upgraded Bartley Janssen in that kind of sense. And you think what that sort of centre back pairing gave us in what was quite a defensive minded Gary Monk team. I think it'll be similar in the Premier League in terms of what we need, and I think that's what it offers you. And I think as well, Bijol can play alongside Strauch, no problem at all. I don't think there's any question of that. He does play actually on the right of the two in terms of Udinese, but for the national team, he plays on the left. And I think he was actually against England where he really impressed me against Harry Kane at last year's Euros. He did a superb job on him in terms of we all know what Harry Kane likes to do. We know he likes to drop in like a number 10. Bijol followed him all the way and just totally limits his influence in terms of both out and inside the box. And I just think he's superb, Bijol. Of course, the recovery pace. I think what I'd say is the pace element of things we can cover for with Rodon and the pacey left back because we know
Mm.
Leeds are probably going to sign a left back, but I think it's important is a left back with pace as well, and maybe not so much an overlapping left back, more of a defensive minded left back. I think it's key because Jaden Bogle can still do the same on the right hand side. I'll come on to why we can afford to play a more defensive left back in a second, but in terms of in the context of Bijol, I think that can be compensate for Biol's lack of pace massively. And let's be honest, if Biol did have pace, it'd be a Brighton or Crystal Palace signing this all day long. Yeah, I think he could still play for a team of that quality, but I think the reason he isn't going to a higher end Premier League club in terms of experience at this level is probably just that pace element. I think that's probably what puts off maybe your Brightons, etc., and maybe your Brentfords as well. But I think if he had a bit more pace, I think he'd be probably a bit out of our reach. So it kind of works in our favour that a little bit if you think about it.
Yeah, and I guess a lot of it is when you look at Jaka in particular, is that aerial dominance as well, looking from a defensive perspective and an offensive perspective, because we know the marginal gains are absolutely huge when it comes to set pieces. 3 of the bottom 5 of the set piece success teams last season were the promoted teams, which I think is absolutely criminal, to
Yeah,
be
it
honest
is.
with you. And I think you've got to have that level of dominance in the air, haven't you? That's got to be one of the incremental gains. And I think the second balls is where he's apparently very strong as well. Like you just mentioned, Oscar, quite rightly, the defensive blocks are going to be really, really important. And from the data, he excels in clearances, blocking shots, and effectively last ditch defending, naturally making him a fit for maybe a 4-2-3-1 system.
Absolutely, and I think as well in the back three, it could work as a
Yeah.
central centre back. You know, if you had Rodon and Strauch either side of him, because I don't think we will sign another centre back now unless we get a sale in the centre back area. But I don't think we will. I think it will be that will be our centre backs in terms of
Do,
locked in. Um,
Oscar, do you think obviously with him being a right sider and obviously us having that balance of Jaka and Pascal, Pascal looks like he's a little bit more of the ball progressor as he kind of is with Joe Rodon, but I feel Joe Rodon's progressed a little bit more in that respect. But from a Premier League standpoint, you're probably relying a little bit more now on Pascal Struijk at that next level. I feel with Jaka Bijol, it's not his natural fit either. So once again, could there be a potential balance of Jaka Bijol as a right-sided centre back and Pascal Struijk, and maybe we're kind of looking at Joe Rodon trying to fight for his place a little bit?
Possibly, but I actually think Biol's excellent on the ball. I think that what he does give us is the fact that he's equally comfortable on his right and left foot. His composure as well. He's composed enough to play through the lines. It's a bit less evident through Udinese because Udinese are a little bit more direct than what we would be. And I think the league as well, the nature of the league, Serie A, teams don't tend to press as much or try and encourage other teams to press them. In terms of to call it like the technical term, baiting a press kind of thing. That doesn't tend to be a thing as much in Serie A, so it's less obvious. But I do think his technical quality is very good. I think, of course, Rodon's has improved as well. But I think Bijol and Struijk could definitely work alongside each other as well. My preference would be Rodon and Bijol. I just think physically, I like that a little bit more. I do really like Pascal. Don't get me wrong, and I think certain games will probably suit Pascal more. But I do look at Rodon and Bijol and think that is probably, and I think it says the recovery pace as well. I do prefer Rodon in that sense. By no means is Rodon an absolute monster in terms of speed, but in terms of he's deceptively fast, Rodon. I certainly think in terms of covering the wide channels, and I think that will help Bijol a lot. So what I like about the signing is that he can play on the right and the left. I think that's what makes it a bit more ideal for us in the fact that, if Rodon has a couple of bad games, you can just as easily switch him out for Pascal and then Bijol and Pascal alongside each other. I just think it's seamless, that kind of transition. And as I say, for his club, he plays on the right. For his national team, he plays on the left, and he looks equally comfortable in both. But yeah, I think another thing as well is in terms of quality on the ball, as much as Pascal and Bijol for me have good quality on the ball, I'm not so sure we'll be looking to play through the lines as much, certainly in the first season.
Yeah.
I'd like to
It's
think,
gonna, it's gonna be a lot more direct, isn't
I
it?
think so, especially if like
Yeah.
the goalkeeper link so far, and says Nick Pope's probably been the biggest one. You're
Mm.
not going to suddenly start asking Nick Pope to play through the lines. It's not what he does for Newcastle.
And Oscar, like what you've said as well, when it comes to Udinese, Biel's passing stats aren't amazing, but like you
No,
said,
no.
it's naturally about the philosophy and the ethos and the style of play, and you're expecting that to be quite similar with Leeds United, aren't you? But you do wonder with the pressy side, and obviously Leeds going a little bit more direct. Of course, you'd expect us to do that. But I guess with the pressy side that we're going to get from the likes of Newcastle, Brentford, Brighton, Palace, it feels like those front lines are all pressing now in blocks. Bijol is probably going to have to get accustomed to being on the ball at the back and being at a certain level when it comes to press resistance, I guess. It's not all just going to be those lump balls.
Yeah, I think he has got the qualities to do that. I think we don't see a lot of it in the Udinese team because I think obviously the pass completion rate as well, the context behind that is often Udinese, just from the high, I've only really seen highlights, so I've not seen full 90s, so I probably can't fully judge it from that. But my impression is Udinese look to Bijol and Soleil
So,
alongside
like,
him
yeah, yeah.
in terms of they look to get them to play long balls over the top. And with Italian defenses, I know it's a bit of a generalization. Italian defenses tend to be quite compact and deep, but it's still pretty much the case in Serie A.
Yeah.
Not as much as what it was in the past of, like, say, the days of Maldini and Cannavaro and things like that. It's not as much as that, but it has got a bit more progressive since then. But still, the same idea. You've got to try and find those gaps. And as we know, the riskier the pass, the less likely you are to complete the pass. So in terms of pass completion, it doesn't concern me too much. Though whether he's as accomplished as, say, a Pascal on the ball, I'm not sure. But I'd say he's probably a step ahead of Rodon on the ball, definitely. I think there's a lot of quality there in that kind of regard. But I think it's obviously his defensive side that stands out more than the technical side. But yeah, it's just...
I was a little bit of a bigger component, a bigger advocate of Omar Saleh, and I guess the beneficiary and they complement each other quite well, don't they? There's a physicality when it comes to Bijol. There is the ability on the ball, of course, maybe not as advanced as other centre backs that me and you have spoken about before, but Saleh provides mobility and pace, and that's what we've got to utilise. And maybe it means that Leeds, in some instance, can also go to a back three because there's a little bit more protection there. Obviously, there's a little bit more cover when it comes to centre backs, but there could be a little bit of pragmatism there as well with Bijol now involved in the picture.
Definitely an option. Yeah, I think of course I've mentioned Brentford numerous times on this channel in terms of how well they adapted to the Premier League and how much Thomas Frank changed his philosophy from the Championship to the Premier League. And ideally, I'd look for Daniel Farke to do something pretty similar. And I think one of the biggest things he did was change to a 3-5-2 or 5-3-2, whichever way you want to put it. And he did focus on having that back five to defend deep in terms of have that extra man defending in the box and making it more difficult for your Man Cities and your Arsenals to break them down. And Brentford have become more progressive, but they still look to change to a back five against the sides who was kind of in the top four or top five and got ridiculous quality going forward. And that
what
might
I
be
quite like,
something
what I quite liked about the Oscar as well is against some of the teams of which evidently Thomas Frank felt that he could hurt. They went to a 4-3-3.
yeah, exactly,
So when
exactly that.
when they're up against these certain teams of which they're going to struggle against, they get a little bit more defensive cover, a little bit more centre back solidity, and like I just mentioned that word, that key word in this cover, and they're able to fluctuate a little bit. And it's about getting those players integrated in being able to almost go to a three to a back four, and that's really difficult. And that's credit to Thomas Frank and his staff for being able to do that.
Absolutely that. And I think we've got the right profiles to do that. As we already said, we've got, three, good centre backs. I think whether they can all make the adaptation to the Premier League, which remains to be seen, but I believe they can if we have the right system in place. And I think people like Jayden Bogle, for example, I think Jayden Bogle has had experience of playing at wing back for Sheffield United over several seasons. I think his offensive and defensive output is similarly well balanced. He's equally as good going forward as he is defensively. So that can work as well in that kind of sense. I think the left back signing is very key. I think Junior Firpo would have been ideal as a left wing back, but less so as a left back in the back four. So what I would say is we probably still need to bring in a more defensive-minded left back. I do believe that.
Yeah.
But he does have the qualities to play left wing back as well. And that's what you kind of see at Brentford. I think as well for Brentford or Brighton, for example, is when they switch to a back three, one of the wing backs tends to be more offensive, more like a winger. Say, for example, Tariq Lamptey in the past. Or Rico Henry for Brentford. And then the other side, Roeslev, for example, goes a bit more defensive and it still has that back four out of possession shape on the cover. So what I'd want from Leeds is the biggest thing is flexibility. And people like Jaka Bijol, the fact he can play on the right and left in a back four and a back three, he's got experience of playing both. That is a great start for me.